Alli, it's number 300.
300. I mean, that is incredible. So big congratulations to you, Peter. I mean, yes to the podcast, but like nods to you because you started this 300 weeks ago. And
Yeah.
that's incredible. First of all, I just want to give pauses. Like, I don't know what the exact stat is, but I have heard that most podcasts, they'll do like a season or 10 episodes, and anything above that puts you in like let's just say 5% category. And then if you cross like 100 episodes, it's like 1% of that percentage. And so like 300 episodes of all the podcasts out there. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And so, I mean, I'm so thankful to be part of the team, but kudos to you for doing podcasting for 300 episodes.
There are days. There are days, but honestly, this last year, as we're keeping this is right around 1 year as well, Alli, and like the topics just get deeper, better. The conversation is better, and it's amazing. And well, we brought somebody back from way back. I believe it was 2016 when episode 1 went out. And if you haven't heard it, I'm linking it right to this episode. Derrick Griffin is here with us. Number 1. How you doing?
Wow. Number 300. How does that hold up? Number 300. Like, come on, that's incredible. Like, I can't even begin to put it into words. Our journey stems back 8 years plus ago now, and here we are, 6 years later from the first episode ever. And I mean, you talk about growth, you talk about stories for days and days on end. To be able to have this experience and to be able to share the space with you once again, it's incredible, man. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your 300th episode. I'm excited.
Well, thank you for having the guts to do the first one.
Yeah, man. No regrets. Looking back at it, it's like, oh my goodness, yes, I'm excited.
It's funny because we talk about reflection a lot, and I know we're going to go there. But Alli, you've come in a year and you've seen the first episode. So launch those questions. What's the first question you got to ask this guy? I've been there with him, kind of, in and out of his journey. But it's kind of cool because you have a fresh sense of, okay, this is what happened 6 years ago.
Yeah. So this question is to both of you, really. So like, walk our listeners through, like, how did you choose Derrick to be the first guest? Like what was kind of like your prep, or, like, was there prep? Like, I mean, just like walk me through what you remember from before airing, Peter, and then Derrick, like you being asked to do this, and, just to give some context that maybe like our listeners don't know about, like, how did this thing get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. No, when I know I've said this part before, when I went on an EF tour with Tyrone Williams and Lindy Novotny, and coming back from seeing Sir Ken Robinson speak in Switzerland, taking kids across Europe. That's where the disrupt education thing went. And just kind of remind viewers and listeners that I had this book, and I have it somewhere. I couldn't find it for this episode, but it's a book where at the end you sign it, like, what are you going to do, right? And it's kind of your own signature to kind of hold yourself accountable. And I've always thought those things are cheesy, but I actually did this one. And it was like, what are you going to do to change education? So I started thinking about like different things, and I just started asking students in class. And at the time, Derrick, you had just graduated right that summer, the year before that summer. And here's a guy who was in some of our business classes, was a go-getter, somebody who led. Our students even came back and talked to them in the business club. We're always kind of hanging out after school, working with kids, him, Dan Bevan, Kelvin Evans, call you guys the big three. And I just asked him, I'm like, yo, do you want me to, I'd love to interview people about what they want to change in school. Would you be willing to do it? And secretly, Alli, I knew he would, because he's just a go-getter. So, and this was not a podcast at the beginning. It was actually a YouTube channel. It still is a YouTube channel, but when podcasting and Anchor came out, I think in 2018 is when I started dropping all of these on the podcast. So that's where it started. So why did you jump in on this one, Derrick?
Man, I'm gonna go back to the old saying by Daniel Bevan, and this was his quote. You know, he said, "A dream without action is just a wish." And I'm just gonna leave that right there, because, you know, thinking about that time we were in, and we were thinking about all these different ideas and ways to disrupt, right? And whether it was education, whether it was you know, creating a social media platform at the time, you know, Benapro, a play on words, an opportunity to bring people together. You know, we understood that, you know, we could talk on it as much as we want to, but how are we going to act upon it? And so I think we had a lot of like-minded individuals around us who understood that, and we wanted to be a part of something great, however that looked, whatever that looked like. And I think what's so awesome is that from that time until now, it has then expanded upon all of our paths in which we were destined for at some point in time, right? And here we are, episode 300, talking about it. So I say all that to say, you know, for me, looking back 6 years ago at that episode, it's pretty amazing, because, you know, at that time I wasn't really focused on what other people thought about me, or, you know, what this was going to turn into. You know, it was really just like, I know I have like-minded individuals around me. I'm motivated. I want to be successful. And so how do I get to a point where I can continue to embark on the success that I know I'm destined for? But ultimately it started with the people. And, you know, with the idea, I think, you know, I saw that you ran with it. You saw, you know, there was a different level of motivation I feel like you had, you know, because of people like Daniel Bevan and Kelvin, and, you know, we all had a different approach, you know, and I think that was what was so great, is that we were able to bring all of our ideas together and really make it make sense in the end. So
I think something that maybe people in the educational space don't realize is that there are certain like groups of students and classes of students, and just the right personality mix that happens, and it's like super magical, and it does not happen every school year. It certainly doesn't happen in every class. And I mean, I know teachers who have gotten like entire classes, you know, like they've all gone out after graduation and are still in touch, and there's just this, it's an unspeakable like bond that you can form. I mean, most teachers have it with like a class or two their first year teaching, and then maybe they're lucky enough to have like another special group. Again, you can't really put words on it, but it sounds like that's something that you had that year, Peter. And along with this EF tour, and it seemed like it really culminated in the start of the podcast and the YouTube channel, you know, and how it's grown. So what would you say, you know, like looking back to, for each of you again, like what have you like learned the most since starting the podcast? And just Derrick, like, you know, what have you learned about yourself since that episode? First episode, which you throw some punches in that one, so let's go there.
yeah, I mean, man, where do I start? I feel like for me it was first off starting with like the people I had around me, right? That was like the starting point. You know, what Mr. Hostrawser talked about in that first episode was, you know, having this non-traditional background, you know, and I think that really stems from my music background as well. You know, I was passionate about business because of Mr. Hostrawser, and he opened up that lane for me. But, you know, I don't come from this music background and you know, musicians that were classically trained. You know, I always listened to smooth jazz around the house because of my mother and my father, and because of that I always heard the saxophone, and that's what opened up that lane for me to start music, right? You know, fast forward into high school, Peter never knew that I was a part of the jazz band. You know, it was a parent teacher conference that pretty much revealed that door, right, to many folks. And, you know, I think as the years went on, junior, senior year, working with real world clients and having real world experiences that not everyone is able to have at that age, right? That's what essentially laid the foundation for me to have that belief. And that's really where it starts. I think a lot of times when you're that age, you're 15, 16, 17 years old, it's just a lack of belief in yourself and understanding that you're capable of doing this. Or, oh, I have to wait until I get into the real world to do real things. And the bottom line is we've always been in the real world, right? And so that's why we have to continue to bring those ideologies into traditional education for others to understand that it's not just about reading what's on the script. We have to look at what's off the cuff, which I am a part of a group now called Off the Cuff, just so happened. I want to give a shout out to the DJ firm. It's a great group that I work with now, and that's what we're about. So I think ultimately what you have to embody is this, idea that everything needs to be in alignment. And if it's not in alignment with what you do, then you have to really be honest with yourself, right? And so I think when I look at my growth from 6 years ago up till now, every step of the way has continuously brought everything closer and closer together. It's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be a little bit of rigidness or, something that may kind of stand in your way, but how do you navigate around that, right? How do you find those tools and those gems to, kind of wiggle your way through? And, as I always say, finding a way to get around the noise, right? So when I think about graduating from high school, going into college, for me, I wanted the best of both worlds. I was like, I'm still passionate about music. I'm not going to let this go. I love business because of these experiences I've had, being able to work with Coca-Cola and Hyatt. I love presenting. I'm outgoing. I like collaborating with groups. And how do I bring that together, right? So I ran into a guy by the name of Michael Zaremba at RMU, who is still he actually graduated from that university, Robert Morris, and so he was the director of music there at the time. And I kind of illustrated to him this is the environment I'm looking to be in. I want to do jazz, but I'm passionate about business. He's like, you should look at Robert Morris. And the first time I came across Robert Morris was at a college fair, believe it or not. And I tell you, whoever they had there representing that table, that was it for me. I was like, this is where I want to be, right? It wasn't about me getting that out of state experience, staying in the dorms. And at the time, I honestly felt like that was overrated. And I know most people probably would have said otherwise. They're like, I need my freedom. I need to be away from my parents. I don't have time for this, but ultimately for me, I was always long-term thinking. And I think part of my long-term thinking really stemmed from my father. My father always said, and it resonates with me to this day. He's like, this is all short-lived, Derrick. These 4 years of high school you're doing, you're about to go to college. This is short-lived. This is not your end-all, be-all. Understand that. And as long as I understood that, it resonated with me to this day, knowing that now, I look back now and I'm like, I don't have any regrets about how I did it, the way it went down. I went into music at Robert Morris, and when I did that, I saw a track to be able to finish college at a much earlier time than a lot of my peers. I did a dual degree program at Robert Morris, which essentially allowed me to earn 2 degrees in 3 years. And for me, I knew at that time when I was 18, 19, that time was my biggest asset, and it still is to this day. And that's ultimately been what's been the driving force behind everything I've done. Every experience has led to the next thing.
First off, I would never move out if I had your parents, dude. Your parents are awesome people.
Appreciate that,
and they are amazing. And I do remember that parent teacher conference when we sat down and just, a little story about Derrick when he was in the small business management class. The kids struggle. They had to create a t-shirt to raise funds for a charity that they chose. And then they had only 25 or so to sell. And people don't know what to do. They don't have the confidence to make decisions sometimes. And that's part of the process of learning small business management and or entrepreneurship. And I remember Derrick came back with a check. Like, and we were like, where'd you get this check from? He's like, oh, I was just walking up and down Harlem Avenue and talking to business owners.
Oh,
And that does not happen, Alli. I'm like, everybody just, I still remember it was like, you know, the DJ stopped everything, the music, and everybody like looked at Derrick after he said that. And we're just like, and you know, obviously the coach, son of a coach in me is like, that's what I'm talking about. That is taking a risk. So that was kind of my introduction to Derrick as he was you know, building his own. You know, the one thing that I see when I go back and listen to a couple of the early episodes, especially number 1, that I've learned is to just shut up like and interview somebody and not like, oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, you know, and it's funny, but I also show this to students now and anybody who wants to start anything. Like, yeah, it was rough, man. Those were like 9 minutes. We had people in there, Owen and Seb, they were doing the video work. There was editing. I didn't edit. It was crazy. Sometimes we had 2-3 cameras in there. It was after school. People just trying stuff. And I think that's the beauty of it. So I just learned to be quiet and ask the right questions, I guess, Alli.
And evolve, like, I mean, as the podcast has, I mean, the consistency that you have and continue to have with the podcast is just unmatched from my perspective. So
Alli sometimes like, are we taking the holiday? I'm like, no, we'll record and then I'll go ahead and put it out there during.
Yeah, like the first year I was like, do you take a week off for, you know, like around Christmas time or the new year? Or like, do you ever take like a week off in the spring? No.
No, we always have. I mean, we'll record earlier, but like,
Yeah.
I always like schedule these things out. So
it's my kind of planning, you know. People who are in my circle know that like I'm a planner. I have months and months mapped out. I know Peter and I, when we're scheduling, he's like, can you do this date? And I like know instantly, yes, no. So it's a good balance because we're both planners in different ways. So Derrick, you said a lot in your answer, which is phenomenal. So much to pull through, but I want to go back to something that you said on episode 1 that I think kind of ties into some of the stuff that you were talking about. So you said school is set up to be one-dimensional. And that just really, like, I was like, oh man, it's so true. Like if I was drawing like a school and everything, I would put it on like one dimension. And then you talked about how entrepreneurship gives you many dimensions. Like that's pretty like very wise for your age. But I'm wondering, like, what made you come to that conclusion just after finishing high school? And, you know, like, what would you say about, you know, where you've kind of come from a one-dimensional to now, like, kind of time more in your story?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it goes back to the man in the middle right here, Mr. Hostrawser. Like, you know, I got to give him his flowers, as my generation would say, you know, because at the end of the day, he gave us the belief and the conviction to go after things that most people at that age probably would never think was allowed for, right? Because we're always being told like what's appropriate and what we should be doing and what's best for us, right? And the thing about Mr. Hostrawser, he allowed us to understand that like it's really your job to figure out what it is you want to do. I'm here as a complimentary figure to whatever it is that you're trying to go after, because I'm going to give you 110% of belief that I have behind whatever idea, vision it is. Like I knew whatever it was that we came to the table with, like Mr. Hostrawser was going to back us on that. And so I think because of that, I took that belief everywhere. I started thinking like whoever my professor Robert Morris is, like I could care less what they have to say, honestly. Like I'm going to move on my own accord, because I knew no matter what, like I was going to be successful in whatever I decided I wanted to do. A lot of that comes from being able to fail. And that was something that I also talked about on the first episode. Fail fast so you can succeed sooner. a lot of times at that age, you know, that's the one thing that you don't want to do. You don't want to fail that test. You can't get below a 21 on your ACT, because if you don't, you're not going to be eligible for this program and that program. And, you know, that's the problem. The system has programmed us to think one way. And because of that, it's hard for many individuals, not all, but many individuals, to think otherwise, or to think that there's another way to do it. And so because of educators like Mr. Hostrawser, there is still hope in the traditional education system for us to continue to expand outside of what has been constructed. And I think because of where we are in society, we have to continue to break barriers and continue to disrupt in ways that haven't been done yet. And it's only a matter of when, because at this point, you see the new integrations, you see technology is now taking over day-to-day curriculums, and students are finding ways to learn and absorb information in different ways. So how do school districts adapt to that, right? You know, that's the key right there. And I think, like, you look at 6 years ago, like, that's what Mr. Hostrawser was doing. And it's just a testament to the work. If anyone listens to the podcast, it's just a testament to the work, the consistency, like, and not buying into the message that's just been placed on the traditional system. Like, that was the thing that we also got a chance to see from Mr. Hostrawser. Like, he gave us the real, like, he gave us everything. He was like, listen, this is what's going on, you know, in the scenes of teaching, and this is what I have to deal with. And but what we realized was, like, that's just life. It wasn't just like school, that's life. Like, you're going to be hit with so many different things that come your way that you may or may not expect. And it started to become, at the age of 18, like, just expect the unexpected, and it's okay, because you go and you do it and you do it again. And it's that repetition, right? I think about right after that year when I graduated, I went down to Illinois State University at the time, where Kelvin Evans went to college. And we were going into an entrepreneurship showcase to present our social media platform that we had put together. We put a business plan together. I had Mr. Hostrawser on the board of advisors, right? And we assembled all of this together. Like, I was like, I want to make sure we have the right people. And I remember that first year we went down there, we didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea. Like, there was no structure. There was no foundation. I mean, we just went down there swinging. We were confident. Like, there was nothing you could tell us. But then coming back the next year, we knew what we had to do to approach the situation in a more calculated form. And to get that instant feedback from Mr. Hostrawser and all of our mentors that were supporting us, right? It's just so big to have that in your corner, you know? So that's why I always relay that message of, like, you know, stay close to those that resonated with you back during that time, because now looking back, I mean, who knows where I would be with music and all my other future endeavors now that I'm a part of, without individuals like Mr. Disrupt Education, as I like to call him.
I'm dying here. Like, I'm so humbled, dude. Like, for real. It brings back a lot of memories, and honestly, it's hard to hold back tears, man, because a lot of people don't know this, but Mr. Belpedio, Doug Belpedio, who's not really on social media, he's retired now, was my mentor. And wow, he was just he still is an amazing dude, but, like, as an educator, he would take unbelievable risks in the classroom. And I don't mean like damaging risks, I mean like great risks for kids. And to see what happened there last year, just kind of to paint this picture, Alli, for you and the listeners, Hyatt stepped in, and we somehow, and I'll give this to Derrick Griffin, he somehow connected with the vice president of Hyatt, and they were hiring a new vice president of marketing, and she was coming from, I think, USA Today, and a couple other, like, big places, and she was coming into Chicago. So the project was where the students had to create a place in an advertising piece for Hyatt, like the entire Hyatt brand, not like, you know, the Hyatt down the street, like the Hyatt brand. And one of the most amazing things that happened, and this, I don't really say this much because like, I don't know, but this was, I wanted to replicate this over and over and over again. The VP came in and literally started handpicking teams. Like he saw everybody go, and then he was like, I want you. Obviously, Derrick, you were in there, Kelvin and Dan, but he picked a lot of different people and said, I need you all to, now you're the team. And he like handpicked people. And, you know, I remember talking to Doug about it. I'm like, yeah, I wonder if we'll get in trouble, because in school, like, you know, you have to give everybody a shot. But he was like, everybody got a shot. And those who shone, you know, like, I don't know. I remember Drew Swope was in there. There's so many great people. And they came in. Now, this is Doug's last year before he retired, on a Saturday by themselves, and worked on this project. And I have pictures of this. I still talk to Derrick Griffin, who's still teaching at Oak Park and River Forest. It was, and I remember when we went there and they did the meeting and everything, and they did the presentations. I remember Doug, I don't know if you remember it, Derrick, but Doug Belpedio was standing off on the side, and he was almost in tears, because he was like, this is the best way to go out. Like, I peaked, like, this is it. And wow, I'm sorry, man. I didn't think I'd get emotional, but
you're good.
But that started the replication. I want to replicate that. I want to work with communities. It doesn't have to be the Hyatt. It can be mom and pop store, whatever. And you guys did that. I mean, you guys did that. And so I'm forever thankful for that. But again, that was part of the Disrupt Education story, where, you know, let's go. Why? I started asking, why are you doing it this way? What is it? Right. And Alli, if you've seen these three guys, they have three very different families, different backgrounds, like, and I'm like, but they're all doing it. So I'm like, there's a code in here somewhere, and I still, you know, I'm trying to find it. So it was amazing. It was truly amazing. And big shout out for Hyatt taking that risk as well. I mean, that's what needs to be done. And that was MBA stuff. That wasn't just bachelor or, you know, college, you know, stuff. That was undergrad stuff. This was MBA stuff that these kids were doing at 17, 18, some of them 16. Had a few sophomores in there. So
those types of experiences are what takes a one-dimensional, you know, one-track mind and opens it, right? I mean, you can't replicate something like that in the classroom. It's impossible. And what's really, really, really cool, and from the beginning, this podcast, the message at the core, if you go back and listen to the first one, you'll hear Peter and Derrick talking about how it's not just go to school to go to college. Like, that isn't working. That message is in the podcast from the very first episode. And you both have kind of talked about these out of school experiences. Peter is I mean, the transfer of belief and the confidence building and all the stuff you do in the classroom, then with the community partnerships and with these experiences that you have done throughout the classes that you teach, is really like that untouchable, you know, transformation that you get with students. And then, you know, Derrick, you were part of that experience. But it's so interesting, like, we just did an episode not that long ago talking about, you know, what if communities invested, like in particular, South Dakota, and what impact it would have on the community that people live in 5 to 10 years later. And Derrick, you're like 5 to 10 years later, right? And that impact is, it's still there, right? Like, that I'm going to guess, and you can kind of add to this, was probably a core memory and a peak educational experience. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure you probably had a few of those, hopefully, in your educational career, but that's probably up there. If so, kind of talk about that, and just what you would kind of describe as kind of peak educational moments.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, by far, like it's by far like it's the tipping point. Like it's like the climax of like, okay, we've got something great here. Like that's the one thing. Like once we graduated, like I was like, I know we got something great here, regardless of what the end outcome is. Like greatness is bound to happen. Like it was just only a matter of when. It's only a matter of when, because I kid you not, from that time, that was the first. So just to back it up for a second, I was the president of the business club, the first business club ever at Oak Park River Forest High School. And to be able to bring those like-minded individuals in the fold and now see what we're all doing, right? You look at myself, Kelvin Evans, Daniel Bevan, we assembled a social media platform, and from there have now went into our own paths, right? Because of that project we were working on and that belief that was sown from my high peak educational experience, Daniel Bevan is now a full-time entrepreneur. He's a web coder. He's a web developer. Kelvin Evans, he's now established his own health company, Lightbody Herbals. Shout out to Lightbody Herbals, creating products across nationwide for those who are looking to better their health through CMOS. I myself am a musician. I've actually established my LLC back in December of 2020, which, as you know, was the heart of the pandemic. And I will say, because of that peak experience in education and with Mr. Peter Hostrawser, that allowed me to build the mindset to really like understand that I can go through any battle that's put in front of me, hands down. And I say that now because, even before then, I was doing a lot of group oriented work. I was performing in bands. I played in the jazz ensemble at Oak Park, and eventually played in the jazz band in college, which was great. But I knew I always wanted to do something a little bit outside that. Like I always knew it was something, but I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. I started networking with different artists around the city. One of them actually went to Oak Park River Forest High School, and that was like the stepping stone for me to start working with individual artists around the city and being able to collaborate with different musicians outside of a band format or a band structure, right? And similar to the traditional education system, the one thing that always resonated with me about music was the idea of music theory. Music theory to me felt like math class. It felt like I had to follow a certain structure to get the answer right, or otherwise it was deemed upon as like, this isn't the right way to do it. And for me, what I would say is I've created my own rules with music, because now I play all different genres of music. I don't follow one format or one way of doing it, right? Because there's multiple ways of doing it. And music is the universal language of life. It's what brings us all together, whether we're a performer, a listener, right? And so because of that peak educational experience, I've now been able to transfer those skill sets into my business, which is now transferred into me performing for over 150 plus solo events around the Chicagoland area and outside of the Chicagoland area. I've had the pleasure of being able to tour. I've had the pleasure of working with several different artists, whether that's through WGN News, Taste of Chicago, Chicago Cubs, right? And these are things that, like, if you told me 6 years ago I was going to be on a tour and, oh man, I'm about to go play for Wyclef Jean, right? And Lupe Fiasco and all these amazing artists, like, I would have never imagined that. But that's what the power of God had bestowed upon me and the educational experience. And for me, it was just a matter of like, the opportunities in front of me, you just got to go get it now. That's it. You just got to put in the work, put your head down and make it happen. And that's the one thing that I will say is that, when you go to high school to get your diploma, to go to college and get a degree, it doesn't guarantee you anything. Like, you still have to put in the work, and you have to understand that it's a process. See, we live in this society now where we want this instant gratification and things to happen so quickly. And it doesn't work like that. That's the reality. And there's a lot of things that Mr. Peter Hostrawser and myself, we've been through, that we've done, closed doors, that people don't see. Saturday, grinding on a Saturday to prepare for a presentation. How many people do you know are going to do that or make those type of sacrifices? That's really what it ultimately boils down to when you want to try to I guess differentiate yourself from the pack, as I like to call it. You want to find a way to find your niche and really bring out the superhero in yourself, because we all have it. You just got to tap into it. That's the bottom line. And that's what that peak educational experience brought, for me and where I am now.
I mean, there are times that a lot of people don't see, and thank you for bringing that up there, because there were times where within the system we were blocked. And do you remember the community Wi-Fi project, Derrick?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So we were establishing, one of the administrators there was like, we need to work with our community. So I'm like, yeah, let's step in. And this was basic business club stuff. It was a lot of volunteer work. And we were helping set up the OPRF, or the Oak Park community Wi-Fi. So at the time, like, Wi-Fi was evolving. It was rather expensive at home. We have the gamut of students socioeconomically. So what we were looking at doing is getting our businesses involved to where students could go to their businesses. Hence, they would get on their Wi-Fi and were able to hang out there. Yet there were rules, kids couldn't be rowdy or loud or anything, or disrupt business or anything like that. And we put this together, and it was a 2-year process. And this was exciting because, Derrick, you guys were the first year, and then the second year. And I remember you all came back and they were presenting to the board. And the Board of Education was like kind of ho-hum about it. And this was visionary stuff that the students were coming up with. And we got one, I think maybe 2 places, the library and another business involved, where we were setting up their routers and everything. And we're doing this during our lunch periods and before and after school. And I remember, I'll never forget, one of the board members kind of laughed in an arrogant way. And this was the second year. These guys started it, but then there was another group of students working diligently on it, and they did a great job. Several of them went to great colleges, including Georgetown and a couple of different places. He was like, what do you think? We're going to have classes at a Starbucks? Little did he know that 2020 happened, and we do have classes at Starbucks. But these kids had that vision. And that to me, that was a huge blocker. I remember we walked out in the hall. These guys were extremely angry. They were like, a couple of choice words and like, screw this place. But it was actually, that comes along with all these things that we're learning. Of course I was angry. Of course I was hurt that, wait, somebody on the board didn't believe that this could work. And still wanted to go the traditional route, which, whatever, everybody's allowed, their opinion. But to me, that gave me more fuel, because it was these young people with a vision, and they were acting on it, and it was working. And then, the project fizzled out because there's no funds or no other people, working on it. But it was pretty amazing, and it was way in front of our time. And to me, in education, the future is the students in and around the school. They know what's coming. They know a lot faster. These guys introduced me to Gary Vee. I mean, it's like, they know, and that's the amazing part about it. So when you get to that peak, though, I think that was one of the things that, Derrick doesn't, we don't talk about. Those are the things that happen behind closed doors. Is there are big slaps in the faces. I had teachers, honestly, in my own school laughing at me walking down the hall saying, what are you going to disrupt next? Like, no lie. Like, I'm a junior in high school. I'm a grown man doing this stuff, taking risks. And you have to learn. You have to you've got to go through it just like the students. And man, I mean, I don't know. I get some weird energy from it, I guess, or maybe I've just gone upstairs. But but yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on when we started this whole thing. And man, just blessed to be here right now. I mean, this is great.
Absolutely. The one thing I will add in, the parallel where this all comes together, you know, Mr. Hostrawser and I, we felt comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, we were going to go down swinging together, regardless of what the end result was. Like, we weren't ducking each other or anything. Like, we were going to be there for each other no matter what. And, you know, when you come in with a different approach, it definitely, you know, you can tell it throws people off, you know, because they're not accustomed to this style of or approach. You know, I think about Deion Sanders right now, coaching over at Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
He's bringing his own approach to the table, and no one's ever seen it. So in some eyes, it's scaring people because they're like, wow, he's really doing this. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we were doing 6 years ago. And like you said, people just didn't see it back then. But look at where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's become normalized to step into a Starbucks and have a podcast and talk to someone, you know, on an open invite. So I say all that to say, like, you know, we're just looking to disrupt and continue to find ways to innovate and change people's perspective. You know, that's really what it comes down to.
I mean, I think what's really, really cool about the story and sharing it is that we talked to so many amazing guest people doing incredible things that sometimes can feel out of reach for listeners and for people who want to disrupt education. But I think diving into this Hyde experience now, yes, that creates certain circumstances, but a peak educational experience that gets a student in front of any kind of business owner or out in the real world doing a project, exposing them outside of the four walls of their classrooms, can be the peak educational experience. It doesn't have to be, you know, a whole year-long thing, but putting a project or putting a community partnership, starting small and growing from there, that one day, that one class, that one experience can really make a difference. And so this idea of, you know, like, even if it's a failed project, failed in quotes, even if it doesn't work out the way that you think it's going to, it's that persistence to try. And at some point, it's going to create something beautiful. And so for educators in particular, administrators, or people just feeling like, oh my gosh, what can I do? There's so many blockers, there's so many barriers where I'm at, is that there's got to be something that can be done. And it could turn a mind, it could turn a couple minds, it could be that tipping point that, I mean, Derrick, you went through and it's really blossomed. And then you have Peter, who set that kind of stuff into motion, and then your mentor who set it into motion for you, right? Like, there's always this tipping point, this experience, and it doesn't have to be Hyatt. It can just be thinking about something that you never thought about before, understanding the behind the scenes stuff, not just making it so much of a performance, which is oftentimes what I felt school was like, and that one dimensional kind of, like, you know, you're watching these actors, you're not really an active participant, you're going through the show of education, and then the scene's over, and where's your role in it? And I think helping students find a role is something that, I mean, guest upon guest that we've had that are former students or current students of Peter's have shared. So it's obviously like something that you have done, Peter, and continue to do to sow those seeds. And the podcast being like an out birthing of that kind of like classroom experience. So I did have another kind of question for you, Derrick, from the first episode. Is, okay, you talk about entrepreneurship back in the episode, and it sounds like you've gone through a lot of experience since then. So what would you say about entrepreneurship now versus kind of what you said on episode 1, which was, that you were an entrepreneur and you are trying out new things, and it was the short little clip about it, but what would you say about it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about my generation and I'm sure even your generation, like, we crave time freedom. Like we understand that like we don't get this moment back, right? So how can we find lanes or opportunities that are going to open up those doors to be able to do that? I believe that entrepreneurship is one of the biggest, if not the biggest vehicle to getting that opportunity in life to be able to expand your horizons and really come and go as you please, right? The one thing I always knew when I did that episode and at that time, I always wanted to have multiple outlets, right? When you look at college, it wasn't just college, it was college, music, me going out to rehearsals in between classes, graduating within 3 years, going off into sales, which was something that I realized was a parallel in a way because being on the phone, it was like the ability to improv and not know what's going to be asked of you on the phone and being able to react at the spur of the moment. So finding ways to bring everything together ultimately then led me to entrepreneurship with music and understanding that, I believe, my goal is to impact as many people as possible through the universal language, right? And so for me, it's being able to read a room, understand like, how do I make this a space for everyone to feel welcomed, right? And I believe entrepreneurship allows you to do that. There's no set of guidelines that you have to follow, right? It's what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And for me, like I've been able to observe that from other people in my circle who are now entrepreneurs, whether it's a barber that I've worked with, whether it's my brother Daniel, and seeing his path and what he had to do to make those sacrifices. And what's so cool is that we're actually working together now because of that. Like he saw the vision in me. He saw that, man, DG, I see you've got it, man. You've been putting out the content. You've been consistent. You haven't let anything stand in your way of building that progress. I believe I can come in and be a complementary figure to what you're doing. And what's so awesome about entrepreneurship is the ability to be able to collaborate with those around you in any way possible, and finding the right partnerships. And that's what we've essentially done. We've been able to establish a partnership through entrepreneurship, which has then stemmed into an opportunity for me to also help him in ways too. Like he wanted to learn like the sales side of like, how do I sell a musician, or how can I help manage a musician and making sure they have all the proper things on the back end? Because what entrepreneurship also does is, we're problem solvers. And I think that's the key. You want to be in a position where you can be a problem solver. Where I realized there was a problem is that there's so much talent in Chicago, but a lot of times it's the ego that we allow to get in the way of what's more important, and not having the business side organized and not understanding like having systems in place so that you know how to organize your finances and being able to reach out to the proper booking and management and things like that. So, these are all things that like I had to learn on the fly, but then having someone like Daniel in my corner who has been there, he's built the skill sets. He's like, hey, why don't you implement this program, Airtable? This will be your internal calendar. You'll know, who paid you, when they paid you, what time your gig's going to be at, what time do you need to arrive for sound check? Like that way, these details on the back end. So now it's like, what's next? Like, I think that's the great part too. Now you've solved one problem. What else could we solve? Right. And so, entrepreneurship is something that I believe also can provide longevity. And when you look at the grand scheme of what we do in life, we want to try to leave something behind. At least I do. I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it's about impacting the masses, right? Understanding that we have a generation that's to come after us. So what are we going to do while we're here now to make that impact and to allow that to, manifest into something greater than ourselves?
Sounds like you've had some very good experiences. Like the answer you gave, 6 years ago it was this like vision casting answer, which is beautiful, and it's like just ripe with possibility. And now you've like had all of these experiences to kind of like land on what you thought entrepreneurship was and like grow into it. And it's going to be incredible to see like in 6 years, you know, like what kind of answer you'll have.
I know. Just thinking about it as we're talking about it now, it's like I'm thinking about it. I'm like, wow, we got to run this back on episode 500. Like,
right.
like it's just got me excited because, you know, and I think that's where, you know, Mr. Hostrawser and I, we relate. You know, we're always thinking about like the next thing, but the one thing we do talk about as well is being present, right? Like being present within the journey and not being so quick to think about what's the next step. Because while you're present, there's so much to appreciate. And what we're now doing right here is we're reflecting on, you know, the fruits of our labor and the things that we've been able to sow, those seeds that we were able to sow 5, 6, 7 years ago. Look what that's evolved into. You know, I've seen the growth from Mr. Hostrawser. I mean, he's the social media guru now, as far as I'm concerned. Like, you know, we'll bounce ideas off of one another. He's talking about Chat GPT, and someone would look at him now, my age, and be like, "What? This guy doesn't know about Chat GPT. What is this? What is this about?" Like, you know, like, oh, this is a new thing that we're using, you know. And so it's just really cool to see like the openness and the willingness to want to learn, right? And that desire, you know, that you have. That's what's ultimately going to continue to propel education forward. And I understand more now why you've stayed in the system that you've stayed in, because like you even told me yourself, you're like, I can't leave these students behind. Like, this is my duty. Like, this is my calling, you know? And in the most literal point to that, like, I'll never forget, you even mentioned this. You're like, I've been at OPRF for X amount of years. I've never been to a high school graduation since I've been here, but I will be coming to your graduation. I'll never forget that, because since that moment, it's like, I've never been left behind, you know? Like, I have someone that's really in my corner. And I think when you know you got that, speaks volumes. Like, people don't understand like how impactful that can be long term.
I would say, you know, I think, Alli, our final question is usually, you know, what would you change about high school, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to give my like quick piece here on that, because I don't like, I'm just going to come at it from a teacher's point of view. And everything you said, man, I'm getting like verklempt here. It's like for real, like there have been moments, right? And, you know, people come and go from the profession all the time, and that's fine. I mean, you know, but I think if you feel like this is a thing that you want to do, you've got to have these conversations with previous students. You got to. You don't have to have a podcast. You don't have to have like, you know, all social media or whatever, but you know, in reunions and things like that, where you can sit down, or just maybe, you know, have a phone call, or, you know, have the students come in and talk to your students. And y'all weren't the best students. I mean, let's be honest, like these guys, I mean, I don't know what your average GPA was, but it was not 4.0. Okay. I'll just keep that there. And Derrick, I think you were the highest GPA, so I'll just give you that. But like that's beyond the point. I think every educator out there, administrator, whoever you are, that's in the system or even outside the system, you know, and Alli, we still have conversations with your students. I mean, we've had a few on as well, which you can still learn from, not necessarily always just in the system, but have these conversations that will give you a lot more of a empathetic look into what's happening that you don't see, because you have 125 students every semester that you have to, you know, kind of guide through this process. And these conversations, and Derrick and I are still having them on LinkedIn Live. I mean, we're just creating, and it's because it's a part of who we are. But those conversations still kind of stem from music back and forth to education. So I will ask you, Derrick.
Yeah.
You're the person who will kind of round out here. how would you, seeing from way back 2016 when you're on day one to 300, is there something you would change in education from what you initially kind of said in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, with everything we've talked about here, I believe like creating a cohort, right? Creating a group of individuals that the next generation can really lean on, right? And have those open conversations with no judgment, no thought in their mind about what is this person going to think of me if I ask this question. I feel that high school, being in high school, that was like half of the battle. We were always concerned about the next person, what they were going to say, and keeping a status, right? And putting that ahead of what's really more important. And that's the lessons and what we're trying to learn here. Why not take a group who has been in the real world, has had X, Y, and Z experiences, so to say, and be able to transfer that knowledge back to the next generation that's right behind them, and really make it more of an even playing field too, where this generation that maybe graduated from the same high school can be a part of this cohort, come back in, talk to students about what they're learning, and also talk about what they're experiencing years out, not too far removed from high school, right? And I think someone like myself, I haven't been too far removed from high school yet, but when I look at it, I'm like, wow, like I could go back to my high school now and be able to share these experiences with students who understand that I can relate to them too, because I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, like I'm looking at the same stuff that you all look at, and I'm not too far away from where you all are right now. So understand that what I'm doing is you're more than capable. Never think that you're out of it. Like understand that you're capable, and being able to build that belief, right? A belief system, whether that's in the form of a cohort, whether that's in the form of the board of advisors, whoever that needs to be. We have to construct something that's going to allow us to disrupt that one-dimensional way of thinking and really allow people to understand that there's so many different ways to approach different situations. And we have to be able to also meet people where they are, in a sense to where not everyone's going to learn or grasp the concepts in the same manner. Why not have 5 or 10 individuals that have completely different mindsets can come and talk to those students and find that alignment, so that perhaps they can learn things sooner rather than later, And I think because of someone like yourself, Mr. Hostrawser, I was able to learn a lot of things sooner before they happened, I was able to learn a lot of things sooner before it came about, and I was able to avoid a lot of mistakes early on and be able to get over those hurdles sooner rather than later. And I believe that's helped my progress a lot. I thank you for that. And I think that's the way the system needs to change. And as long as Disrupt Education's around, it's gonna happen. So it's only a matter of when.
Alli, you got to take us out with your last thought, your final thoughts on 300.
It's gonna be tough to summarize this one. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible to see like where it started, hear more about the beginning of this whole Disrupt Education podcast. I'm honored to be a part of it. And I think the big takeaway that I'm leaving with is the power of being in alignment, sowing seeds that you're not worried about where they're going to grow, but you're planting on good fertile soil as an educator. And like if you are an educator, that work is present, and just this idea of alignment, and that when you find your class, your lane, your group of students, this cohort idea, and you're working so well together because you're on the same track, like lean into that. So that's special, and it's not every year, it's not every class, and so when you find that really, really lean into it for anybody who's like in that, like if they are like, okay, what should I stop, or is this enough? I mean, if you've got the ability to pour more into that special sauce, do it.
Mhm.
Would be my kind of final thoughts for
Mhm.
this very, very special episode. Thank you so much, Derrick, for coming back.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again because you're the start.
100%.
Yeah.
And I do honestly thank you, Derrick. And if you guys catch lives on LinkedIn, we're there. I'm likely going to drop them on YouTube sometime here when I get time. But Alli, I do want to thank you because there are several times when this is hard. This is hard work, and it doesn't, always, pay you back every minute. But I would have not been here. I would have not made 300 without you. So thank you. Because of, well, why not, right? My worst class in high school, Derrick, was chemistry. It was my worst grade. Why not bring a chemistry teacher who just quit and jumps out of airplanes? It's perfect.
I love it.
So all jokes aside, Alli, thank you so much for your lens. It is amazing. And here's to 300 more. So appreciate you guys. Again, Derrick Griffin, thank you so much. Head back to the first one. You'll see all my screw ups, his dreams and visions. Alli won't be there, but but for Alli Privitt, I'm Peter Hostrawser. Thank you all. We can't get to 300 without your support and you all listening. Until 301, we'll catch you next time on Disrupt Education. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrawser or Alli Privitt.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.